All right, this next focused lesson is going to be on the Edit Mesh menu. That's this menu up here at the top in Maya. There's a lot of great tools in here. We're only going to touch on a few of them in this particular lesson. We're going to look at the Extrude tool, the Bevel tool, the Camfer Vertices, and the Bridge tool. But before we do that, I thought I would just do a really basic thing for any of the beginners that are out there. Something to think about. This is just a simple object I was working on, a little symmetrical form, right? But you might want to know how to adjust the position of your center axis on an object like this. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this particular, oh no, you know what, I'll stick with this object for right now. I'm going to go to just single view here, hit the space bar there to do that. So you might want to say be able to rotate this object, and right now if I rotate my object, I'm rotating from the center point of the object, right? That's fine. But what if I want to rotate it so it's from the bottom of the object and kind of tilting in a certain direction, almost like a top on a table, right? This is sort of a strange top-like form, so that kind of makes sense, right? So I'll go back to the four-way view. The shortcut for adjusting the center axis of any object inside of Maya is D. So if I hit D, you'll notice I can toggle back and forth. My center axis changes when I hit D. I kind of get this little inner axis which has both rotation and position on it. So if I want to change the position right here, I can move up or down. In this particular case, my object, I'm going to bring downward here to the bottom of the object. My object's actually upside down, I believe, in my perspective view right now. But I'm going to go ahead and bring it. I'm going to go to the front view here, and let's get that guy back again. And I want to get it right down at the very tip of the object. There we go. That's pretty good. And all I have to do is hit D again. And from now on, if I go back to my space bar and I rotate this, let me get this back so we can actually view it properly. Now if I rotate, you can see it's going to go from the bottom of the object, so I could get that perfect kind of top tilt if I wanted to like have this a little leaning space to it. So I just like to point this out. I know it's a really simple thing, but a lot of folks don't know that the letter D will allow you to change that position of this axis, right? Allows me to scale it from that position, which can be really handy of where you want to scale from. If this was like the head of a robot or something, then I would scale upward instead of from the center, which might collide with its body. Or if I did have this sitting on a ground plane, so it doesn't like crash into the ground plane, I can again change that center axis position. So just a quick little tip there before we get started on the Edit Mesh menu. All right, I'm going to turn that back off and get back just regular mode. So I'm going to leave that at that position right now for editing. All right, so on any object that you're working with, I'm going to go to object mode here, just make sure. And you can either go up to the Edit Mesh up here at the top and access all these tools. So like I said, we're going to look at the Extrude tool. We're going to look at the Bridge tool, the Bevel tool, etc. There's also a cool way, not all these items are in there, but if on any object that you have selected, if you hold down Shift and right click, you'll get a slightly different menu that's specialized. So there's that extrude feature right there. There's a bunch of like common tools that people use a lot that really come in handy. Let me undo that real quick. Turn that back on. So there's lots of different things in here. It's just another shortcut. So I'd like people to know that holding Shift with a right click will bring up a lot of these different tools that we're going to be exploring in future lessons. Okay. But for the most part today, because it's easier to access some of these additional panels to the right, I'm going to come up here to the top and go to Edit Mesh. Okay. So we're going to start off here and talk about the Extrude tool. So I'm going to delete this complex object right now, and I'm just going to do this with a simple cube. And I'm going to add a little bit of subdivision through the attribute menu. So I'm going to go to the cube here, and I'm just going to subdivide this. I'll bring this up to like 4 in each dimension, okay? And let's go to single view here, and there we go. So Extrude is probably one of the most powerful mesh editing tools in any kind of 3D software. You've probably seen it called like a push-pull tool in other software, introductory 3D software. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you how it works. So if I take a face selection, I can click here and maybe I choose all 4 of these faces, or I just want one right now, and that's fine as well, right? So I've got this, and right now, if I go up to Edit Mesh and I go down to Extrude, it's so used so often that it has its own shortcut, which is Command E. I can go ahead and click on this option menu, and it's kind of cool. It will give you a few more options here, but you also get some of these options anyway, but there are a few extras in here. So if I just go ahead and hit Extrude, you'll see my icon has now kind of changed a little bit. I have some different options here. So I can pull this out and it'll literally extrude that into its own kind of three-dimensional facet on the original cube, which is really great. So, I can play with all sorts of things here. One of the key ones is divisions. I can change it so it has 3 divisions along the way, or maybe it just has 1. You can kind of see how it created those additional faces on the way out. I don't mess with offset very often, but whoa, that just went a little bit crazy. It kind of went really big. I probably shouldn't have gone that big on it. Let's take that down to like 0.2 offset, or maybe 0.6 offset. So as you can see, that kind of extruded it out, but also kind of twisted and extruded it. Watch out with the offset. That's a little sensitive one there. I'm going to go back to 0. And you can definitely control like where it translates to. So 0.5 will go farther. 3 I can type in. Now it's going to go whatever my unit of measure is. I think I'm set to inches right now. So it just went 3 inches out along that particular plane that I selected. So really powerful tool. I'm going to undo. Thickness, again, just kind of like brings that out further. And so you can also do it interactively, which is really great as well. So, I can always undo all that and go back to the beginning. Like I said, I can just drag it out to whatever length that I want. You can see it's putting it right here. Maybe I want to change that from 0.78 to 0.75, 3/4 of an inch. Now I still have this selected, and this is where things get really fun with extruding, is you can just continue the extrusions. But I don't have to continue on the same path, I've got this extrusion right now, so I can always take that, click off of it. To click out of the extrusion tool, I just click back onto my main selection tool. I can always rotate this particular selection a little bit, and then Command E again, and continue it. So now I'm kind of creating the arm of a robot here, right? And I can move this around a little bit. I could send it upward. I could kind of rotate that path outward a little bit, and Command E again, and keep going. I could also scale it down as I go. So now I'm really starting to create kind of like an arm or a little antenna or a horn coming off of this thing. So the Extrude tool just becomes really powerful for polygonal based modeling as we move forward. And you're going to learn as you're able to smooth an object and do some other things to it just how powerful this really is. But all that being said, it's not just used for moving outward. You can do some really interesting things with the Extrude tool. So I'm going back to the beginning here, take my selection tool. So this time I'm going to select the 4 of these guys together. I'm going to do Command E. I can bring it inward as well. Now that went a little wonky with that. I'm not sure why I got that, but I'll just do one face here right now and do the extrude again. Let's bring that inward, and you can see how I can get a really nice kind of inward extrusion on it, right? Let's try that again. And Command E and bring the whole block in or out. Yeah, that's interesting that it's making those faces. It must just leave that sidewall in there, which I could delete after the fact. I'm not sure why I'm not getting one down below there, but we can pull out multiple faces at the same time, which is fine. It just did an autosave on me, that's why that popped up. So yeah, pretty cool. Now the other thing we can do, I'm going to go ahead and just choose one again, Command E, and instead of pulling on one of the arrows, I can click on this center box. Whoop. I'm sorry, I can switch to my scale instead of move tool while I have an extrude going, and it does what's basically called in other software is an inner extrude, which is really cool. This is a great way to make kind of an inner facet, and then Command E again and pull that out, and Command E, but again I'm hitting R on my keyboard to switch to the scale tool, and I can do like an inner extrude scale like that, and then again switch back and bring that in, or if I hit Command E a second time, it'll actually pull that inward as a channel. So really interesting, powerful combinations there. So just I'm going to review that again because I went through it a little bit quickly. So again, I can take a selection. I could always do Command E or Control E on a PC and pull that out or push it inward, right? But if at the same time I hit R on my keyboard after that extrude has been activated, I can do an inner extrude, right? Then Command E again and pull out from there. So it's a really nice way to kind of add extra faces, do some subdivision going on, and then again be able to play around and make some really complex models all from one simple primitive, right? So Command E again and pulling that inward. So remember that combination of moving between the move translation tool or the scale tool along with your extrudes. Really powerful combination there. Okay. Let's see. I think the other thing I wanted to show you, aside from just doing this on one side, is that we could also use what's called some symmetry tools. As long as you have a symmetrical object that has equal number of faces on both sides, you know, I could take a selection here, so I could take this cube here, and I could turn on symmetry. So up here at the top of your menu, I could go ahead and turn on symmetry. I'll also go ahead and turn it on in the X plane. So X-based symmetry. So if I click on that, you'll notice it made a selection on the other side, almost like I had turned off that camera-based selection, right? Well, watch this. As I extrude now, it's going to extrude out of both sides at the same time. So if you're working on a symmetrical object, this is really, really powerful. A lot of people do this as they're working with character modeling. I'm tilting that, and that symmetry is all working on that X-plane together. Go upward and keep going and going and going, and you can create some really, really fun symmetrical forms. There we go. Really cool, right? So anyway, we can do that. You can also do it obviously on any plane you want. Just make sure you change maybe from X to Y. So then I would click, if I clicked on here, it's going to go vertical. You know, see it. So if I click on one of these, obviously I get sort of a Y stack going on the Y front of it there. If I kind of separate them, doesn't really do much if I go over to the X side of the object. And then again, I could go to Object Z, and it's going to go in the Z depth plane as well, depending on which side of the object I'm on. So you just kind of have to play around with these. And then there's World that will do it off of the everything in the scene as well, so you can kind of play around. But symmetry can be a really powerful tool, and you can kind of see how you can get these symmetrical selections that save you a lot of time. Alright, I'm going to move back here to Object X. Get my orientation back. There we go. So yeah, there we go. I got both sides of it there on the Object X. So symmetry and extrude work really well together. Let's look at some other options aside from the extrude tool, but the extrude tool is a really powerful one, so you know, definitely play around with that, and you're going to have a whole lot of fun here moving forward. Alright, so let's talk about beveling the object. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to object mode. Beveling actually works in both object, face, edge, and vertex modes. So I can have this cube, and I can go up to Edit Mesh, and I can go down to Bevel. Again, there's an option menu you can play around with here and do all sorts of fun stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and just hit Bevel, and I'm going to go ahead and increase this a bit. Let's go with 3. Actually, I'm sorry, I have a subdivided object here, so I'm going to go ahead and just bring in a single cube here. And let's do that again. Edit Mesh. When I just do bevel on a single cube like that isn't subdivided too much, you'll see it bevels all the edges on it. Now it's got this kind of like faceted vibe to it, right? And I can play around with a lot of settings on that. How smooth do I want it to be? I just went from a 1 to a 3, go back to a 2, and kind of see. I'm going to go ahead and turn on shading so you can see a little bit of the wireframe on shaded, just to kind of see what all it's adding from a subdivision point of view. I can also play around with the depth at which it's doing that. So that kind of pushes it outward versus inward. Go back to 1 or go to 0.2 and it kind of really cuts that depth in even more. So there's a lot of features here, you can play around with. Obviously don't go too crazy on the settings. That's at 0.3. I'll go to like 0.5 and I get more and more and more. So a lot to play with here. So I'm going to undo, because not all that, you don't always want to do it to the whole object, right? Sometimes you just want to do one part of the object. So a real common is just to take an edge. Maybe I just want to, let me turn my symmetry off. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose this edge and then go to Edit Mesh and go down to Bevel. I get that same window that comes up. I can decide how many segments I want to bevel that into, so I'll say 3. And this really affects kind of the curvature of that bevel. Like the more segments I do, the more curved it's going to be. There's 8. Now I'm getting a really smooth one. And now I can play with the depth. 0.1. It's a lot easier to control, like just a few selections versus a whole lot of selections. 0.5 brings out a little more. Let's just go to 1. But I could also bulge this outward if I wanted to, which is kind of a cool feature. So you can really do a lot with beveling to make a more advanced form as you go. There we go. Now I'm getting a super bulge coming out of the side of that. Now that's getting a little segmented, so I might need to bump this up to, say, like 20, and then that's going to really smooth that out subdivision wise. So play around with this. Bevel is a really powerful tool. You can have a lot of fun with it. I'm going to undo. I can also, instead of just edge, I can do it to a whole face, and it'll get all the sides of that face. So again, if I go to Edit Mesh and Bevel, you can see it kind of bevels and facets that out. I can give it more segments. I'll give it like 5 segments to kind of smooth that out, and I'll pop up the depth of it. And very quickly you can see I'm getting kind of like a really unique, almost like picture frame edge or a little monitor display, a kiosk, something like that starting to emerge just from this simple cube. So don't underestimate the power of that. There's a lot you can do with it, right? Just played with the fraction amount on that and it kind of bulged it out even more. So bevel really, especially as you're like building pieces of furniture or making interior spaces, you're going to do a lot of beveling as you move forward. I can also do this to a vertices. I mentioned that. So if I go to a vertex, I'm sorry, not vertices, vertex, I can, it's really just going to kind of subdivide it, and this is very similar to chamfering on a vertex. So I can take a single vertex point and I can go to Edit Mesh and again bevel, and you can see it just kind of subdivides it into 3. It does smooth it out, which is fine, but I could go to like 0.5 and it's going to go a lot bigger. So that's kind of an interesting tool for just kind of like making another face there, subdividing it a bit, right? Now if I choose 2 vertexes and I do the same thing and I go to bevel, it's just going to kind of do it to both. Kind of messes with the shading there a little bit on the exterior of it, but it, again, a nice way to kind of like subdivide very specific points using that. And that's what the vertex chamfer has, a similar kind of feel to it, or the Camfer Vertices, I should say. So I can click on Camfer Vertices. It's going to do a similar thing there. I can decide how many divisions. So I could say like 2 divisions. Whoops, I'm sorry, I went to preview mode there. Sorry about that. I can go in here and do like 0.4 and just kind of expand it. But it's really just going to kind of smooth off that one vertex there as we move forward. So a few features there, kind of similar, but some nice features to work with inside of Maya. All right. Last thing I want to show you here is the bridge tool, and then we're going to talk about the smooth preview as well here, just to kind of go along with it. So bridge tool is really powerful. There's my autosave going. I'm going to go back to object mode. I'm going to duplicate this object. I wish I could just copy and paste. I think it's a problem with the educational version, because if I copy this, I actually get this like student version menu that pops up, and if I paste, I get it again, and it doesn't actually copy and paste it. It makes sort of like a, well, it does make like a group. I take it back. It did actually make it. It just makes you do a bunch of those extra windows in the process. So I'm going to undo that. Let me get rid of that group and delete it. I just like to do duplicate. So Command D. I don't have to do any of those pop-up windows that come up with the student version. You can find it here under Edit and Duplicate, or just Command or Control D. Now I have a perfect copy of that, right? Which is really cool. And so maybe I'll rotate this object real quick. And actually, let me do that under my, I'm going to rotate this. Nope, I didn't want to do it under the X. Let me put that back to the 0. I want to do it on the Y. There we go. And now I can have them kind of backs facing each other. So Bridge Tool is a really cool tool that works with the Combine tool, where I can kind of connect these two things together back into one object, right? So before I can bridge them into one object, though, I have to combine them. So I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to grab both of these, and I can go up to Edit Mesh, and I can combine them together. Or actually, I'm sorry, that is, yeah, it's under Mesh, and I can combine. So kind of now when I click on them, they're combined together, which is fine. I can always separate them back as well, and then they're back into two objects. But to work with the bridge, you have to combine them. There's also a little shortcut up here. I believe it's this one right here, the Combine Selected Polygon Objects. Now they're selected again into one surface, which is great. And now I can go to Edit Mesh, and I can go to Bridge. And I'm going to go ahead and bridge. Ooh, polygons equal number of select. Oh, you know what? Let me select the faces that I actually want to bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Face Mode, click on that one, and click on that one, and go to Mesh, or Edit Mesh, and Bridge. And that connects the two together beautifully, right? And I can add a number of divisions to these. I could say like put 3 divisions in between. I could actually play around with called tapering here and make it bulge out kind of crazy. Let's just do like 1.2, so I can create kind of a neat little like bridge bulge going on, which is kind of fun. And I can also twist it, which I have been having some trouble with getting twist to work, so I'll have to revisit that one later. But yeah, really cool features that you can do there. So I'm going to undo real quick. Let me go back to my selection tool and undo my bridging. There's another really cool thing if you bring up the bridge menu and you go to Edit and Bridge and go ahead and click on the little toggle box next to it. You can do some fun stuff. So instead of just like by default it's going to be linear path, we can also do smooth, path, and curve. So watch this. If I do bridge, or actually I want to do something a little bit different on this one, my bad. Let's go ahead and right click and do face. I'm going to click on this face. Yeah, so let's right click on that and do face. I'm going to bridge these two sides together, right? So let's go back up to Edit Mesh and Bridge and bring up the menu. Smooth, path, and curve. Go ahead and bridge. And now if I increase this number of divisions, you'll see it follows that little path that was created up there, which is really cool. Now I'm creating this crazy kind of archway. If I want to smooth that out, I could say like give it like 10 divisions. Now I've got like a really unique doorway that I've made with this bridge that has come up across the top, which is really fun. So I can go and get a taper on that. That's maybe a little too much. 0.5 on the taper, kind of like taper it down. Now maybe I've got like the legs of a character or something like that. Yeah, that twist still isn't working, not sure why. But anyway, you can have a lot of fun with this, and you can just play around a little bit and enjoy. I actually haven't played around with these little, oh, that's fun. So these are some little like interactive selection tools there. I saw them floating up there after I created that. So that's where I can actually like manipulate the path, which is really fun as well. So again, those little purple dots, when you see those, are usually little control vertices. So really cool to have that feature. I had to switch back to my regular selection tool to grab them. Anytime you see something like that, try moving them around and you can get a lot of variation out of it. So yeah, the bridge tool is really fun. And last but not least, I want to show you what an object like this looks like in preview mode. Just to wrap up, I'm going to do a little quick extrusion on this, just to give it a little bit more of a complex feature. Let's go ahead and extrude this a couple times. You rotate this real quick. Move this upward, scale it down a little bit, and one more. remove that. Cool. So now I've got this crazy creature going on. Now Maya has this great preview system built into it. It's kind of a shortcut key thing. Right now, by hitting the number 1 on my keyboard, I'm just in standard view of the polygonal object. But if I hit number 2, I get a view of what this object would look like if it had been smoothed and subdivided into a smooth object without actually having to do it. And the blue outline still shows me the original polygon, kind of like low poly version of this around it, and allows me to kind of select the original poly, right? So I can play around with different aspects of this and see what happens if I move this or bulge it, kind of how it will affect the original. If I want to see it without the cage, I can hit the number 3, and here's that super smooth object, right? So it's really great as you're designing out a character and using Extrude and using Bridge and all these great edit mesh tools to switch between regular poly mode and then high poly mode. Because, you know, if I took this object and smoothed it, it's going to subdivide all these polygons into like double or triple the number that are there, and then it's way harder to control. But by having this preview mode, I still have the low number of control polygons, but I get to see what it looks like when it's smooth. You're going to see how powerful that is, and I can't just state enough how important it is to switch between that 1 and 3 mode. I love the 2 mode as well, just so I can kind of see where my original polygons are and kind of move them around and bulge them. So you can start off just, you know, roughing things out and then go into this mode and really start to, like, you know, manipulate things and see what it does to the full smoothed out version as you're working. So again, that's just the number 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard. 4 will give you sort of a wireframe version of the smooth. 5, I believe, just brings that back. Yeah, it goes between wireframe and not, and then 1 will bring me back to my full polygon mode. So you'll see me doing this a lot in future lessons. Make sure to check out that 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your keyboard for these various preview modes as you continue to extrude and develop your polygonal based modeling skills. All right, enjoy.